Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Nordic Football Podcast. My name is Steve Wyss. I'm joined by Jonathan Fadugba as ever. So, welcome, Jonathan. How's tricks?
Hi, Steve. Hi, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. Hope you're all well. And yeah, I'm doing all right. I've got my hoe garden this evening. I've upgraded from tea to a beer. It's Friday night. We're having a recording before the weekend, so why not? And yeah, glad everyone can join us.
Good to hear. Good to hear. I'm doing quite well myself. Got a slight twinge of the back. Not really sure how I managed to injure myself there, but it doesn't bode well, does it, on the eve of a cricket match when I've got a back problem? But there you go. It's the way it goes, mate. But yeah,
nerves.
Pretty much nerves. I just hope it holds out for me during the day, during the match. But
they don't call you the Marcus Rosen. They don't call you the Nicholas Bentner of the cricket field for nothing.
And indeed, bow down to the Lord, as they say. But anyway, let's go on to footballing matters then. And it was actually a quieter week in Norway. Had a week off in the Eliteserien, but in Sweden, midweek rounds, and we've now played 10 fixtures in the Allsvenskan so far. I mean, how have you? First of all, let's have a brief rundown of some of those results. So, Jonathan, what caught your eye? Were there any real shocks out there? Were there any, anything really big that stood out?
Yeah, since the last episode, we've had a couple more rounds. It seems to be like I said last time, it seems to be every 5 minutes you turn around and, you cross the road and there's an Allsvenskan game on. So plenty of football at the moment, which makes up for the long absence. I watched Malmö Hammarby from yesterday's games. That was a really interesting game. 3-0 to Malmö, and yeah, we'll talk about that in a second, I'm sure. But in general, it's been a mad season. I mean, it's unbelievably difficult to predict what's going to happen at times. You get teams 1 minute they beat, a big team. Sirius beat Norrköping, for example. Their unbeaten run is gone. You're getting teams doing really well 1 week and then getting absolutely smashed the next week. Mjällby, for example, we bigged them up last week on the show, didn't we? And this past week they got beaten 5-0 at home. So yeah, it is definitely a lot of entertainment, let's put it that way.
Yeah, I looked at the Malmö results and I thought, oh no, we've absolutely cursed them here, haven't we, by bigging them up? But yeah, I mean, there seems to be a lot of wild variations in scores. Shocks are plenty, throughout the season so far. Norrköping, like you said, they lost their unbeaten record, but they bounced back with a win against Varberg. They do have a 4-point lead at the top of the table. 23 points for Norrköping, 19 points for Malmö, 19 points for Elfsborg, who we are going to talk about for once in this episode. And then a gap to Häcken on 17. Down at the bottom, for those who are interested, Falkenberg, Kalmar on 7 points, Helsingborg on 8, Östersund on 9. So, I mean, one of the games that we are going to talk about in detail is Malmö Hammarby, Jonathan. And Hammarby were your pre-season tip to win the league. And at the minute, it's not going so well for them, is it? They're 11 points off the pace. They're struggling. And I do believe they were, I think you mentioned in a message to me the other night, they were a bit of a shambles in this game. So what went wrong?
Yeah, I think it's the JF curse, or maybe a blessing, because I predicted Norrköping last season and now they're well top. So maybe it's skipping a year, my predictions. But like I said in the season preview, my prediction was predicated on whether they signed Zlatan or not. I felt if they get Zlatan, they'll win the league. I don't see Zlatan anywhere at the moment. I think he played tonight for AC Milan. So, that's not happened. And, I think if you'd have asked me in that preseason show, I think I said it. If they don't sign Zlatan, then I don't think they'll probably win it. But, I don't think anybody can expect the sort of collapse that we've witnessed from Hammarby this season. It's quite incredible, to be honest. A few reasons for it. Yes, it's difficult to really pinpoint. I mean, we'll talk about the reasons why they've collapsed like this, but the game against Malmö was really, really shocking, I'll be honest. A 3-0 defeat, but it was so easy for Malmö to win the match. I tuned in thinking it's going to be a relatively even game. Maybe two well-matched teams. Hammarby sort of picked up a little bit of form, if you can call it that. You know, they went into the game having picked up, you know, 1 or 2 results that you might say, okay, you know, they won at Kalmar. They were 3 unbeaten. They drew with Sirius, drew with E12, which was, you know, put an end to a bit of a really poor run where they'd lost 3 out of their last 4 games before that. So, you know, I went into it expecting a tight game, but it was a one-way street. You know, all game it was Malmö dominant. Joe Ingeberg scored in the 28th minute. Kisa Tellin in the 36th minute. And then straight after half-time, straight from the kickoff after half-time, Marcus Antonsson with a tap-in to make it 3-0. I have to say, Steve, what I witnessed from Hammarby in that game did shock me. It was that bad.
So Hammarby, what exactly is going wrong there at in the green half of Stockholm, Jonathan? Real issues, it seems.
Yeah, it's a weird situation. Stefan Billborn definitely coming under pressure. You know, there's starting to be little rumours and whispers maybe about his job. Fans are not happy. He mentioned that he thinks the crowd is having the impact, you know, lack of fans. I don't think you can really have that as an excuse as a professional footballer for your level to drop so drastically. But, you know, it could be it's certainly plausible in terms of a factor. But, yeah, there's real issues with Hammarby. You know, I've looked into the numbers and looked at the statistics in terms of where they're going wrong. You know, we can talk about it from a wider point of view, why they've been so poor. I mean, that game, honestly, it was they were woeful. It was a matter of time before Malmö scored. You could see it coming. They had so many chances. But I'll just look at, you know, firstly, I'll just look at the statistics. Hammarby last season had an XG in total in 2019 of 1.74. You know, they remember this was a team who scored so many goals. They broke the Allsvenskan record for a 30-game season in terms of goals scored. They were flying, they were attacking, they were exciting to watch. They were battering teams left, right, and centre. You know, 1.74 XG, and their expected goals against was 1.25. Now that's not too bad. You know, over one goal a game. That was the area that cost them the title in the end. You know, their defence wasn't good enough to win the league. They narrowly missed out, but that was the area they wanted to. You know, you want to keep your XG lower and keep that XG and just reduce the XG against. This season so far, Steve, in 2020, the XG is 1.19. So a massive dip from 1.74, and their expected goals against is 1.59. So it's gone up, way up. So, you know, their expected goals is way down, expected goals against way up. That's one factor. You've then got individual players. You know, that one of the things I noticed in that game, Steve, that really shocked me was how poor the players were. Ducking out of 50-50s, the midfield was embarrassing. You know, and this is a team that wasn't too bad. I saw them at the start of the season against Östersunds. You know, they played quite well. But since then, they've been alarming in their sort of just general kind of lack of impetus. You know, some of the challenges they pulled out. If you watch that, anyone who saw that game will know. There were areas of play where they literally just gave the ball away in the centre of midfield, and it was actually embarrassing to watch at times. It was kind of exemplified by Muamer Tankovic. Now Tankovic is, you know, a top player, and he's out of contract in about 3 or 4 days' time. His contract expires end of July. You know, he was a talisman last season. So many rumours about him going to Serie A and that kind of thing. He is also another one who his statistics are just way down, and he embodies what's happening at Hammarby at the moment. You know, last season, through passes per 90, 1.73, accurate through passes, 46.9%, dribbles per 90, 4.49, successful dribbles, 55%. 2020, through passes from 1.73 to 1.05. Accurate through pass percentage, Steve, 0% from 46.9%. Dribbles per 90, 3.68. Okay, slightly down, but successful dribbles, 34%. I mean, he and Kakanicic yesterday, you know, for anyone who's got a Tankovic in their fantasy team, which includes me, by the way, you're going to have him out of your team within a week because he was embarrassing. You know, it was really poor. They were hauled off after 57 minutes. Really worrying signs for Hammarby in many areas of their all-round play.
I don't get it. I mean, they were free-flowing. I watched a lot of their games last season, you know, with chances galore, everything like that. I mean, I know they were awesome at home last year. I just wonder maybe whether they could have an excuse on the lack of a crowd, perhaps. Maybe they've got the type of players who like to perform in front of, you know, on the big stage, if you might say. Maybe it gets their juices flowing a bit more. But That's the only thing I can think of. It just otherwise a massive drop in quality. Did they overachieve last season with what they had? Did those certain players that you mentioned there just have freak stellar years that they couldn't repeat again? It just seems such a massive turnaround. But their big strength, which was scoring goals, was gone out the window. So they've got huge issues, haven't they?
Yeah, and the thing is, in a lot of the metrics, they're not actually that bad in terms of their dip. So when you look at their possession, their average possession this season so far is 53.5%. Their average possession last season was 53.07. So they're keeping this relatively the same possession statistics. Shots on target, even again, the opponents are averaging 11.4 shots against them this season per game. Last season, they averaged 11.93. So, there's not a huge difference there, in all honesty. Hammarby last season, 13.73 shots on average. This season, 11.2. So there's a dip, but it's not, it's not a huge dip. But one area they're massively, really struggling in is I think Nikola Djurdjic, losing him was a massive blow. They've really declined in terms of their percentage of shots on target. It's down to, it was 38.4% last season. It's down to 27%. Paulinho, he really hasn't, there was a big fuss about him joining from Häcken. Häcken fans at the moment are kind of chuckling to themselves because they've not really missed him, and he's not really got going at Hammarby yet. They're not getting those goals that they need. Ludvigsson's looked quite lively up front. He's trying his best, but he's flanked by players who aren't really getting those shots on target. He's flanked by players who aren't just making those hard yards, making those through passes, as I've just mentioned with Tankovic. Just there's been a decline, and whether that's because of maybe lack of fans, maybe just the number of games they're playing. The defense is still a lot of question marks. There's a lot of rotation going on in that squad. Maybe I don't know if it's the 5 substitutes is affecting them a little bit, but yeah, they're really, really struggling at the moment, Hammarby, and it doesn't look like getting really any better for them, to be honest. They've lost 3-0 at Häcken, 3-0 at Malmö, 2-1 at Mjällby, 2-0 at home to AOK. They really need to get their arses in gear, to be honest, and fast.
Yeah, you mentioned the five substitute rule there. How do you think that's been working out in the Swedish league so far, Jonathan? What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, well, I did have a little bit of a rant about this on Twitter, and
I saw that. That's why I'm asking it.
Yeah, I've got to be honest with you, Steve. I'm not a fan of this five sub rule. I mean, I do get it. Obviously, we heard the announcement today in the Premier League that the new season starts in about 7 weeks' time, which is, to be honest, ridiculous. The season hasn't even ended yet, and the new one starts in September the 13th. I don't know how they're going to prepare for that. So I suppose from that point of view, you can see the rationale for player safety behind 5 subs. But I just wonder if it's necessary in Sweden, Steve. And one thing I noticed in the game yesterday, they didn't seem to obey the kind of rule that applies in England, where you have to make your 3 subs. You have to make your 5 subs within the 3 sub remit. So you're allowed to make substitutes at half time and then at 3 other points in the game. So you can't make 5 individual different subs. But Hammarby made 4 individual different substitutes. They made sub in the 46th minute, 2 in the 59th minute, 1 in the 76th minute, and 1 in the 85th minute. So that seems to me to go against the rules, from what I can understand, maybe. But I'm not sure. But anyway, in general, yeah, you had a total there of sort of 11, 12 subs, 1 or 2 minutes break for each one. The game, honestly, you may as well have ended it at half time. As soon as Antonsson scored that 3rd goal, you may as well just ended the game, because all that happened from then on was a little bit of play, 20, 30 seconds maybe 1 attack, ball out of play for a throw-in, ball back in play for a little bit, substitution, ball back in play, maybe a little bit of play that goes to a corner. No sort of momentum in terms of crowd, nothing to spark the teams on. A little bit of break in play again, another substitution, another couple of substitutions, 2 minutes here, 2 minutes there. And then they had 11 substitutions and 3 minutes of stoppage time. So it's not working for me, really. If you're looking at it from a football point of view in terms of keeping fans engaged, I was checking my phone about 15 times during that second half, and it was boring. And I know a few people tweeted and said they agree. I just worry about 5 subs, especially when they're going to keep it for a while longer in Sweden. I wonder if it's necessary.
The problem with added on time at the end, it's very variable. Like I've been watching a bit of MLS action recently, and there was one match where there was about 10 minutes clearly needed to be added on at the end of a match, and only +4 got added. And yet there was another match where clearly it wasn't not that much was needed to be added on. They added like 8 on. So I think it's just, this will always be a problem until actually an official clock is added for game stops. Then this will always happen. So
yeah, but surely you can just stop the clock and just continue.
Exactly.
3 minutes is just stupidity. There's 11 substitutes. You don't have to be a genius to figure that one out. And what it does is like it just kills the momentum. There was no desire for Malmö to really score, except they brought on a really good sub we're going to talk about in a minute. Hammarby were just happy to take the 3-0. I mean, Malmö could have scored 7 or 8, to be honest. They still had a lot of chances, but the game was just sort of petering out to nothingness, and just the amount of subs just killed. Anytime there was any bit of momentum, it's just subs, and I didn't like it. I mean, one thing I like about Allsvenskan, actually, a fairly interesting statistic, is the CIES Observatory has produced evidence in past seasons to show that Allsvenskan actually has the highest amount of game time in play statistics in Europe's around Europe. So in general, Sweden is quite good for ball in play time, best in Europe. But this season, and it's a theme as well in other leagues. But I think in Sweden, it's just the games are sort of petering out to dull spectacles in second half. I've found.
Who does he think it suits more, the 5 sub rule? Because there's a case for, if you've got a big bench like Man City or something, then obviously it helps to have extra quality. But at the same time, these smaller clubs that we've got tactics, pressing and stuff, maybe it helps them as well to bring on fresh legs more. So what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, this is another one. And someone actually said to me the other day that, I'm talking a lot on Twitter. I think I maybe need to ration my Twitter time, during this pandemic. I've been on it a bit more than I usually am. And there was a debate that I was involved in that was talking about, will the 5 subs rule benefit? Obviously the common consensus was it will benefit the big clubs. I can see the rationale behind that, and obviously that's true to a certain extent, but I don't subscribe to the idea that it's sort of like a big club kind of conspiracy to help the big clubs, because I think if you're a small club, you can take advantage of it. And I think creative teams will find ways that, as the longer the rule is in place, creative coaches, I think, will find ways to use that to their advantage at smaller clubs. I was thinking of, imagine 5 subs in the Tony Pulis era, Steve.
Yeah.
You'd probably have 5 different throw-in takers coming on.
Yeah.
Like you'd have Rory Delap and 2 of his mates. I can imagine sort of Tony Pulis bringing on 5 centre-backs at half-time. Sort of just playing a really deep block. As soon as the players are tired, bring one off, and you've got half a team. When you look at it, 5 subs, that's 10 changes you can make in a game for both teams. You're changing the makeup of the entire 50% of the team. Makeup changes, so that's where the momentum, I think, goes. But I don't think it necessarily suits the big clubs. I think I was being a little bit provocative on Twitter. I think obviously the big clubs have an advantage, but I don't think it strictly benefits big clubs. I think small clubs can find ways around that, wasting time. Like I said, that game, it petered out because there was just no desire. If you're a big team and you want to play attacking football, if a smaller team has the ability with 5 subs to break up the play even more, change things, have fresher players who can defend. So I think there are ways to exploit that rule for smaller clubs, and I think the smart clubs will do that.
I think there's probably less fear to get yellow cards as well, isn't there? You get a yellow card, you can take them off, no problem at all. Back to, Malmö quickly before we. We're going to talk about Malmö a bit more in general, in depth now. Actually, the 3 wins in a row now. They're looking like the most likely title challenger to Norrköping. Are they starting to show their credentials again?
Yeah, I was impressed with what I saw from Malmö, to be honest. They're always, they're a good team, Malmö. They're the big boys of Sweden, really, aren't they? And I know that's a fairly obvious thing to say, but they are just a solid team. They played a nice sort of 3-4-3 formation. It was fairly fluid. Yondell Thomason, to be fair to him, I thought I saw good signs in Malmö in terms of their style of play, their build-up play. They've got really good players, haven't they? Like Anders Christiansen and Keita Tellin, I think is too good for Allsvenskan, in my opinion. I think he's a really good striker. He'll get a lot of goals. He scored a really, really good goal. He was sort of clean through and just sort of buried it. One of those players who can just finish chances. Some players in that situation, they snatch at it, but he just took it calmly. They've got good players. So, they're not looking too bad. 16 goals scored, 9 conceded. That's decent in terms of their metrics, for and against. They're sort of closing in on Norrköping now. It's a 4-point gap. And of course, of all the teams, I would expect them to be a challenger for sure.
Now, we've got a player in focus on this episode, and it is a Malmö player you're going to talk about. So take it away from here, Jonathan. Who is the player that we're going to be dissecting in this podcast today?
Yeah, well, it's a long time since we've done one of these, isn't it? And unfortunately, one of the ones we did back in the early. Whenever I think of team in focus, I always think of Kingsley Sarfo, but shouldn't really laugh because he ended up in prison. So, I always think about how we bigged him up, and then you get stories of like players he predicted to do well, isn't it? And that was certainly one that didn't go well, but that was for off-field reasons, and like I say, probably not really funny. But yeah, we haven't done it for a while. This player that I wanted to talk about is a player that just came to my attention during that Malmö and Hammarby game. So we're going to look at a player called Amin Sarr at Malmö. He's our player in focus this week, Steve.
Oh, let's hope he's not such a bad boy as Babacar Sarr was over in Molde there. But Amin Sarr, then, he's a young lad, 19-year-old. What can you tell us about him? Because he certainly hasn't made many competitive appearances, has he?
Yeah, unfortunately, well, you mentioned Babacar Sarr and Sarfo. They've got fairly common history, if you believe allegations, allegedly, which obviously... Let's move on from that extremely quickly if we can. But Amin Sarr, he's a 19-year-old player. Malmö, he's only just broken through. He's literally played about four games in Allsvenskan for them off the bench. So hasn't even started a game for them yet. But you know what it's like, Steve. You don't even get a chance to sort of, have a breather in this league before you link to bigger clubs. So you can imagine that already there'll be people maybe starting to look. I've noticed this season, and I'm sure you have too, there's a lot more interest, isn't there, at the moment on sort of Sweden, Norway, Scandinavia in general, from clubs around Europe, starting to look out for the next Haaland or the next Niga and players like that, becoming in a really attractive destination. So Sarr, I'm sure, will have suitors very soon. He's a good-looking kid. He's got a nice jawline about him. Looks like a model on his Instagram page. Really quick player. So what I liked about him in that game is he came off the bench, and as I mentioned to you, it was a drab sort of second half. I was sitting there bored thinking, this is just a useless waste of time. Why don't they just end the game? But Sarr came on and added a little bit about it. Came on, he was running at defenders. He's a forward, but he's been deployed on the right wing by Thomason so far since he's, in the games he's appeared. Made his debut last season against Ostersunds, I believe. Mainly appearances from the bench, like I say. But really good 1v1 dribbling potential. He's made 8 dribbles with a 75% success rate off the bench, really just running at players. And some of the chances he created yesterday were brilliant. I mean, he's made 2.57 shot assists per 90 at the moment on his average, although he's only played, I think, a full 90 in total. But, 2.57 shot assists and 75% success rate on 8 dribbles is really quite encouraging. And Marcos Antonsson owes him his wages, in my opinion, for yesterday's game, because he laid it on a plate for him at least once or twice. There was one run he made, Sarr, where he beat about 4 men down the wing, like really exciting, edge of your seat type stuff. Laid it across, and it's a simple tap in, and Antonsson smashed it about 15 yards over the bar. It was an awful miss. But you know what it's like, Steve. You see these players quite early, and before you know it, they're off. So I just wanted to highlight him because he looks a decent player, and there's a lot of talk about this player this week.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of Belgian clubs are on alert already, and although maybe in this sort of Corona era, they're going to face a bit more competition for these Scandinavian talents that go through. But I'm sure someone like Ghent, whoever else, will be highly interested. So he sounds like a really interesting player. Relatively reasonably tall as well in terms of physical attributes. Can you see him realistically? Just say he was to be staying at Malmö, the whole season. Can you see him getting quite a lot of minutes, or will it be just sort of bench appearances?
Well, what I like about him is, I'm going to be totally honest with you, Steve, and Malmö fans might not like me for saying this, but Malmö are one of those teams that when I watch them, they're very, very good, but they're very, very functional. And I felt that for a few years under Uwe Rosler, for example, and even going back to previous managers. They're a team that I don't tend to, if there's a full schedule of games, I don't tend to choose Malmö if I had to choose a team to watch. I think there's been better teams have played better football than them in the last few years. Although they're always up there, they're a good side, but they don't really excite me. Sarr is a player I think that could potentially excite the fans. I think they've lacked that a bit in recent seasons. They've got players who are okay, but they don't get you excited when you go to a game. They're not like the Zlatan. They're not like an Alexander Isak. They're not a sort of there's been so many players, Negro, and there's been so many players in the last 2-3 years where you tune in to watch those players. Malmö are a bit more functional. They're going to win sort of 2-3-0 maybe, and sometimes you get that feeling that there's not a lot really to gain from watching. Even tactically, they're not that. They haven't under Rosler. I didn't think they were that innovative. Not really doing anything new. But Sarr, what I like about him is he just looks really fresh. He joined as a 16-year-old. He's running at players. He won a penalty against Kalmar. Kiesa Tellin actually missed the penalty. It would have been his hat trick. Last minute, he drew a foul. Just someone who gets you off his seat, like I've said. It's just really refreshing to see that, and lovely to see it really. Another thing I like about him, he's done really well in the under-19 Allsvenskan. 13 goals in 19 games. But what I like about him is he's quite confident. He came out and said already that there's been a lot of press about him in this week. Now that he's come through, he said he's always dreamed of playing for Malmö, and one of the things he said was he wants to be the best player in the world. Now I don't know where you sit on that fence, Steve, in terms of arrogance versus confidence, but I like a player who comes out and has high ambitions. I know it's probably a bit too early to say that, but I do like players who come out and are confident enough to say things like that. Let's see if he can back it up. Obviously, he's got a long way to go to even get in Malmö's team, let alone be the best player in the world. But I don't mind that. I quite like a little bit of I like someone setting a clear goal in their mind and being confident enough to say it. I think that's quite refreshing for me. And just all round, that's what I like about him. He seems like he's got some ambition about him.
I like that as well. Dare to dream. Why not? Why not? What's the point in life if you're not aiming high like that? I think there's a stage when you got to be realistic, but at that age, why not? So fair play to him. And
he said he wants to be the best player in the world. I'd like to play in the Premier League, in the La Liga. I want to be in the top competitions, Champions League. And like you say, if someone said to you, what are your ambitions as a player? You often get players who play it now, don't they? Or they've had media training and they say, well, I'd like to get in the first team and
just go from there. Game at a time,
boring, like boring kind of paint by numbers reaction. I like players who say something a little bit different, have a bit of confidence in himself. Let's see if he can back it up, But he's made a really good start with his first few appearances. Looks really lively. Definitely one to watch.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we got the 3 points. That's what matters the most. Forget about me and my future. Do it, get 3 points for the fans. That's the typical sort of response you get, isn't it? It really is.
I think you've been practicing that on FM, haven't you, Steve?
But
post-match press conference.
Oh man, what was I going to say? Yeah, there's always one team. You go back to Malmö, and you say, if there was a choice of games, you probably wouldn't watch them. There's always one team, isn't there? I mean, for me, for about the last 3 or 4 seasons, it was always Lillestrøm. I'm like, I don't want to watch them because there's nothing. This year, unfortunately, it looks like Sarpsborg have kind of taken over that mantle because Mikael Starr is quite boring with his tactics. So there's always one team, though, isn't there, like that? And you're like, yeah, I'm not bothered about you. You're not bad. They're functional. It's a great word. Very functional. But don't get the juices flowing, do they?
Definitely not under Rosler.
But anyway, Amin Sarr, a player to very much look out for there at Malmö. And, we're going to move on to our final Allsvenskan topic. Now, anything else you've got to say about Sarr before we move on?
No, that's it. I like what I see. It's too early to really project where he's going to go. Too early to even say he's going to be a big player for them. But I think just seeing glimpses, and if you're going to watch Malmö, then definitely keep an eye out because he'll, if he keeps it up, he'll start to get game time and starts. So, that just makes me want to watch Malmö a little bit more, I think, from what I saw in that match. So yeah, good luck to him, and keep an eye out for Amin Sarr. You heard it here on the Nordic Football Podcast.
So Malmö are there in second place in the league, joint second, I might add, because Elfsborg are also on 19 points. And how many episodes have we done on the NFP? Probably about 60 odd, I reckon, maybe 70 even. This is season 4, and to be brutally honest, they're not really a team we ever really talk about, even in the pre-season pods. You know, it's like 1 minute, less than a minute about them. I've just got to ask the question: who are Elfsborg? What are they? Who plays for them? What can you tell us about Elfsborg? Why are they in third position? What's going right for this club? You know, what city are they from? There's a lot of sort of intrigue about Elfsborg. They seem to regularly get overlooked. I don't think we've ever had a question about them. I don't think we've ever had a fan of Elfsborg even tweet at us or even talk about them. So, yeah, let's give them a little bit of airtime, because it may never get any better for Elfsborg, or worse. So take it away, Jonathan.
The mystery of Elfsborg, yeah. What can we say about them? I mean, you're right there, Steve. To be honest, I've actually tried to not talk about them probably for about a good 3 years. You know, they've always just gone under the radar, like you've said. You're spot on there with your introduction. A team we've never really talked about, never had questions, like you say. They're doing really well. They beat Malmö 5-0 away. I tried to ignore them in recent weeks. They made a really good start. They've had some games where, you know, they've looked good. They've beaten teams. They've scored 14 goals, conceded 11, 5 wins, 4 draws, 1 defeat. Lost 6-0 against Häcken, by the way, just about a week ago. So they've gone from 6-0 defeat to a 5-0 win. They beat Djurgården though as well, beat Malmö, beat E12 away. So yeah, quite a weird team. But no, to be fair to them, they're looking okay at the moment. An interesting statistic regarding them, Steve. I mean, one of the reasons we never ever talked about them. Okay, 2017 expected goals 1.5 average, expected goals against 1.8. 2018 1.2 expected goals per game, 1.59 against. So, you know, expected to concede more than, you know, they conceded more than they were expected to score. 2019, 1.47 expected goals. Sorry, 1.3 expected goals, 1.58 expected goals against. So kind of, again, the balance is against them. This season, finally, they've started to change that ratio. They're starting to get the balance right a little bit. 1.4 goals per match, 1.1 conceded. The XG is still against them, to be honest, 1.19 and 1.4 against. So that balance still hasn't worked out. But goals-wise, at least they're scoring more than they're conceding, which is a good thing. Not a team that has a lot of possession, 46% average. But one thing about them, I'll give them credit. They've got some decent players. You know, there's a few players that I do like on their team. I think their recruitment's been quite decent. I think, you know, Elfsborg are one of those teams who have just gradually, solidly built over the last 2-3 years. And, you know, I was quite critical of their manager, Jimmy Tellin, in the past. I've kind of said I'm not a massive fan of him, if I'm honest, at times. He got relegated with Jönköping. That was probably the last time we really talked about him. Do you remember back in the day, Jönköping?
Yeah.
Before they went down, he then got the Elfsborg job, which I felt he was maybe not lucky to get, but you know, he was tagged as a really sort of highly rated young coach type thing. And I felt that maybe at Elfsborg he didn't really make the most of it. But credit to him, he's been given the chance. I think there were situations where he might have maybe, with a bit more pressure at a bigger club, he may have been under pressure for his job, but that continuity, I think, has just allowed them to start building, and now they're starting to sort of bear the fruits of that, to be honest.
Well said. There's some very good analysis there on Elfsborg, and yeah, I mean, I think I can't remember this city myself. I have a look before, but maybe there's a bit of intrigue there. Maybe I should start a Football Manager save with Elfsborg one time. Got me here, Jonathan. But I mean, who would you say the best 2 players have been this season?
Yeah, I mean, they're actually not too. They consider the big derby to be EFK Göteborg, so they're not too far from where I used to live. So they're from a region called Boras. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, but yeah, it's really not far from Göteborg. So you know, Häcken, EFK are kind of like teams I'd consider rivals. You know, they play in yellow and black as well, just like Beck or Häcken. So you know, there's a bit to like about Elfsborg, to be fair. They've got a proud history about them. They've got sort of decent fans, they've not got a bad history, like I say. So they're not a bad team. It's just we never really focused on them in terms of they won the league in 2012 as well, by the way. So in terms of history, they're not a bad club. We've kind of overlooked them just because it's been a bit of a boring era for them in the last 3-4 years. They haven't really done much. They've been lower mid-table, that kind of thing. Players that I like at the moment, I think there's a few that I've flagged in the past. I like Moroki and Dione. He's a young player who's coming through, striker. I think one of their main players this season and the one that a lot of people talk about is Jesper Karlsson. He's quite highly rated. I think Manchester United looked at him around 2017, 2018. There was a lot of talk about Manchester United being in from it. I don't think he's United quality, if I'm honest, but I could see at the time there was a lot of rumours. I think the best players this season, I think they've been based, if I'm honest, my personal feeling is they've been based a lot on the collective. So sometimes they're terrible and sometimes they're good. I like Holst. I think, Danish player. I think he's a decent defender, and in getting some games I've seen, he's been quite good. Fredrik Holst, right back, gets forward. He can pass it, he can cross it. He's having a decent season, and back end of last season as well. I quite liked him. One I considered for my fantasy team, in fact, and you may want to consider it if you think that they're going to, if they're going to avoid any more 6-0s anyway. Per Frick's not a bad forward. He's a bit old now, but he's not bad. Dennis Hummert, you might remember him. Used to play in France, I think, for Troyes. He's gradually just starting to mature a little bit now. One of my sort of 10 players to watch, Jacob Ondrejka's in there. So they've got some young talents coming through. He's scored 1 goal this season. They've got a few. They're developing, to be fair to them, Elfsborg, and I'm not saying they can stay up there in third, but I think they're going to have. They're definitely well placed for maybe a top half finish for a change. Maybe even top 6 if they keep this up.
Very interesting stuff, I must say. Well said there, Jonathan. Quite impressed with Elfsborg. Actually, listening with bated breath almost. About some Elfsborg information, but yeah, I mean,
it took me 3 years, isn't it, to get some information?
Because with me, I kind of was the same with Lillestrøm. They were doing nothing, and I just kind of waited for them to get relegated, so I didn't have to talk about them. And I guess the same with Odd, maybe in the Eliteserien. But Elfsborg, they're doing really well. Fair play to them, and massive shout out to Elfsborg.
Do you want to know a random fact as well, completely unrelated to football? But I went to visit my godson last week, and his favourite colours are yellow and black. He's only 5, and he was sort of telling me that he likes bees, and that's why his favourite colours are yellow and black. So I got a picture of a Watford shirt, and I said, maybe you should support Watford or Dortmund, but maybe, you never know, maybe I should tell him he should support Elfsborg or Lillestrøm or Beko Häcken. But we don't seem to like yellow and black on this pod, except for Häcken, do we, Steve? You don't really like Lillestrøm, did you?
Yeah, I just never really. I think actually, thinking about it, I did do a brief analysis on Lillestrøm in one of the very early podcasts. I completely ignore them. They kind of meandered out, into that mid-table side. It just didn't really do anything remarkable. It's weird, isn't it? Just the way it goes with football. Sometimes teams like that, it's hard to actually talk about them until they do something either good or bad, or something attracts the attention in the headlines. But do you think
they'll be back?
Lillestrøm, yeah, they really should be back. I think they've had a bit of a difficult start so far. I don't really follow the obviously again too much, but I mean, you would expect them to cruise one of the promoted spots. But I think they're going to be like a cup final for every team, though. That's the problem, and that can happen when a big club in any league around the world goes down. They've got a massive target on their back, haven't they? So they'll be back, though.
For sure.
So that pretty much that's it for the Swedish section. We will take a bit of a break now, and after the interval, we're going to talk about Norway, the latest goings on there, and especially a big match coming up over the weekend. So I'll catch you very soon.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to part 2 of the Nordic Football Podcast for another week. We're moving across the border now to, well, not border, but we're moving across to Norway now. Borders are starting to open, aren't they, between Norway and Sweden? There's been a bit of a ban on travel between the two countries due to the pandemic, but our borders are open on this show, and we're going to move to Norway now and talk about, well, we're going to start with another player in focus this week, aren't we, Steve? Now, a bit of backdrop to this. If you haven't been on Y Scout, then I recommend you go on it as soon as you can, because our Y Scout blog for the month has been extremely well received. It's a blog on Bodø Glimt. We've argued that they're one of the best teams, if not the best team in Scandinavia right now. Had a huge reaction, one of Y Scout's most shared and retweeted posts of the last sort of month, which we're proud to say, aren't we, Steve? We're keeping up our good record of shares, putting out some nice and compelling content for Y Scout fans. So, firstly, Steve, well done. I really enjoyed your blog and analysing Bodø Glimt, and tactically broke them down quite well, didn't you?
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Yes, do check out my blog post on the Y Scout about Bodø Glimt, and thanks. I do appreciate all the comments that have been coming in from it, all the likes and retweets and stuff. Obviously, it's been something that's been in the pipeline for a while. I knew there was going to be a lot of interest in them after the start of the season they had. And in the build-up to it, I was sort of researching a lot of players. I expected there'd be a lot of focus on the likes of Jens Petter Hauge, Kasper Juncker, who've been doing really well, Juncker especially, scoring a lot of goals. But it kind of surprised me a little bit when I was looking through the statistics in the league, how dominant Philip Zinckernagel has been for them. And he's going to be the player in focus here. And for anyone who has read the blog, then it will be kind of similar to what I wrote about him on there. But Zinckernagel has been an absolute beast. It's astonishing how strong he's been. He's playing on that in the 4-3-3 Bodø Glimt formation. He plays on that right hand side. And there's no real set role, I wouldn't say, for him. You can't call him a conventional winger. You can't really call him an inside forward. At the same time, sometimes he's almost in a striker position, but that's the area of the field he's roaming in, and he's been causing havoc. He leads the league in so many statistics. Highest expected assist, for example, 3.78. He's had the most shots in the league, second best shots on target as well. So it's not like he's just been shooting randomly. These shots are quality shots that are getting on target, and nearly half of those on target, which is sick, really. But at the same time, he's not just shooting; he's crossing brilliantly. He's had the second most crosses in the league. I think the highest is Mikael Desler, by the way, right back at Haugesund. But they're very accurate crosses too, 51%. So again, quality and quantity. I mean, that's incredible, isn't it, really? In addition to that, he's had more dribbles than anyone in the Eliteserien. I mean, listeners who've never heard of this guy or never seen him must think he's like some sort of superstar, right? I mean, and that's the level he's been playing at, Zinckernagel. It's quite astonishing. Key passes, he's had more than double the amount of key passes than anyone else in the league. I mean, he's just ripping up the statistics in the Eliteserien. There's a few others as well that I haven't even mentioned there. He has scored 7 goals. He's had 6 assists. But I think what's happened with this player, last year he was pretty good, right? He was strong. He was a regular in most people's fantasy teams. I think what's happened during the winter, somehow he's moved to another level due to perhaps the coaches have upped his game. He himself is probably in a better mental state. He's got more confidence, but he seems to have taken it to another level. And I think he almost goes under the radar, as ridiculous as that might sound. Everyone kind of knows he does so well, but maybe like players like Jens Petter Hauge take more of the headlines, So I think he's a bit underrated.
Yeah, really good. And I'm just going to read a short quote from your blog. I'm going to quote it directly here. Now, there is almost a poetic simplicity to the Bodø Glimt system. One of the main contributing factors towards their success in the last 18 months has been an ability to keep a strong and consistent 11 in which everyone knows their exact role. Players are scouted, recruited, or coached from within to fill each role and position. Glimt effectively use a 4-3-3 formation, employing a left wing back with a quite attacking mindset and a right back who is more conventional. Now, I have to say, Steve, this blog was I was really impressed with it. And, you've got a lot of graphs there, a lot of sort of statistics to back up your perspectives, a lot of evidence there in terms of their average possession, 65%. A lot of sort of tactical breakdowns, average player positions. Really, really impressive blog, I have to say. In terms of Zinckernagel, I mean, looking at his background and his career history, he's kind of potted around Denmark and Danish football, hasn't he? He's a 25-year-old sort of Danish player. Not really been a high-profile career, with all due respect to him to a certain extent, given the numbers that he's getting now. Is there a reason behind this sudden? I mean, is it sudden? I mean, I know he's been quite good at Bodø in general, but is there a sort of reason for this sudden explosion that he's putting together? What's your hypothesis on that, and how high is his ceiling? Is this just a nice run of form, or is this something that can potentially lead somewhere, to bigger and better things, maybe, with respect to Bodø Glimt?
Yeah, I was talking to Tom Dent, who was once a guest on this podcast a year or two ago, and we were just speaking about how good Glimt have been, and we briefly touched on Zinckernagel, and I think Tom's kind of right that he said to me, last season he was always getting into good positions and not necessarily finishing the chances or making the right pass, but I think now he's got that extra bit of confidence about him, and that could be a very good point. What Tom said there to me, and look, I think it's just one of them things. Sometimes players get better, don't they? I mean, last season, how many times did I say on the podcast, Bodø Glimt playing fantastic football, they deserve to be up there in the table, but they're overachieving with the player squad that they've got at their disposal. And I think that was kind of a fair comment, but this season, you can't say that. Like, they're up there completely on merit, and there's a reason for that. And it's because they've got bloody good players, Jonathan. And it's a case of that coaching staff up there, right from top to bottom, the scouting departments, the manager, the coaches, the physios, whatever, are just doing a fantastic job getting the absolute maximum out of these guys. They're developing talent. I said they've stuck with that formation. Everyone knows what role they're doing, and they're buying players who are going to fit into those roles. I just simply think it's a fact of they have a lot of quality players now. And Zinckernagel is a prime example of that. You're right, he's never perhaps been anything special in the past, but now he's playing at the minute an incredibly high level. Now, whether or not that will continue going forward, let's see. But fair play to him. It's just a simple fact of players can get better quite quickly sometimes, can't they? And surprise you all.
100%. Now, Bodø Glimt were founded in 1916. So let's go back a little bit in the history books. They've been in existence for 104 years, and their highest league finish in their history is runner-up 4 times in 1977, 1993, 2003, and 2019 last season. Now, I don't want to start sounding like an Alan Partridge day-to-day show, just running through years, but you get a perspective there. 4 times runners-up. The last honours they won was the Norwegian Cup in 1993, a long time ago now. Steve, is this going to be the year that Bodø Glimt win the title for the first time in their 104-year history?
I mean, I actually hope so, personally. I'm not anti-Molde or anything. I really quite like what Molde have done on the field in the last couple of years. But both sides are very unlucky, by the way, because I think any other year, each side would absolutely romp to the title. It just happens to be we've got 2 very good sides at the moment. Actually, I think Norway itself is going to be represented in Europe, forthcoming by probably its best trio for quite some time. Really, it's going to be Bodø Glimt, Molde, Rosenborg, and Viking, who could certainly hopefully improve by the time September rolls around. In that regard, it's going to be a good trio there, certainly represented. But I mean, I said before on the last podcast, I do worry that maybe the squad depth of Molde will be crucial over a 30-game period. But if Bodø Glimt can keep this up, why not? I mean, at the time of recording, They're playing each other in just a couple of days' time. So obviously the result of that match is going to be big, and the 2 head-to-head matches could even determine the title. I just don't see either really dropping too many points at the moment. And then there's a case of what players come and go, I suppose, as well. There's more chance of Bodø Glimt losing players than Molde as well. So at this point in time, if I had to have a gun to my head, sadly, I probably just would give it to Molde as an edge. Not because they're the better team, but because they've got that extra squad depth. But I really hope Bodø Glimt keep it up.
Yeah, and if you haven't seen that Y Scout blog, then obviously check it out. Go and follow us on Twitter at Nordic Football. We've posted the links. Or follow at Just Football. We've posted the links there as well. Or follow our partners at Y Scout, who provide the data. And obviously, thank you to them, as always, for the partnership, which we enjoy. Now, just quickly on that before we move on, because we've got a few listener questions. We're going to come into the end of the show now. There's a big game coming up in Norway, which we'll talk about very briefly. But just before that, yeah, you mentioned Europe. And for those who might be interested, the draw for the Champions League first qualifying round will be done on the 9th of August. With the second round draw taking place on the 10th of August. So that will be coming soon. And European football expert Bert Cassis, who is he runs a website which kind of models UEFA's predictions and coefficients. He has said that there's a strong likelihood that there will be a Northern Europe group of seeded versus unseeded teams. And that will involve Molde with Djurgården, Celtic, Dundalk, Sudova Marijampol of Lithuania, and Konarski Nomads of Wales. So there is a potential there that Molde and Djurgården maybe could meet. So yeah, keep an eye out for that one. The draw will be coming soon. But yeah, European football, it looks like we're gradually gearing towards it coming back, even if it will be probably behind closed doors. Let's move on. Steve, you've done your player in focus there. Zinckernagel, one to watch, 25 years old, and keep an eye out for him as the weeks go on. Another thing that you had some interesting perspectives on in the past week or so is Vålerenga, isn't it? You've got a theory about their expected goals, and I suppose the question that I want to ask you is, are they riding their luck somewhat up in third place?
Yeah, I mean, they hired Dag Alef as their coach in the off-season. I kind of guessed they knew what they were going to get from him, and he's effective. He gets results. He doesn't mind how he gets results. He's certainly not like a part of the bus merchant by any means, but he's willing to get ugly if needs be, and I think that's what's happened in the last 2 or 3 games. They've, I think I posted something on Twitter that their expected goals against the last 3 games against Mjøndalen, Haugesund, and Kristiansund is something like 6.37 expected goals against, and they conceded no goals. And that kind of sums up a Fadugba side sometimes, doesn't it? They don't play that well, but they dig in, they're disciplined, they're organised, and somehow find a way to get results. They have been lucky in those games, like the Mjøndalen match, for example. I think the officiating was an absolute disgrace in that game. Mjøndalen had about 3 disallowed goals just for pure physical strength, out-muscling the opponents, which looked pretty legitimate to me. So I think Mjøndalen would feel very hard done by in that game. But so they were very lucky there. They had 10 men there for like an hour. The goalkeeper got sent off, so they dug in. Haugesund was a 0-0 game, really. It should have been 0-0, but they nicked it late. And then they somehow ground out a 0-0 at Kristiansund. So, look, that's the thing with Fadugba, isn't it? He's always up there. You can't underestimate that manager. He's not pretty or always. His teams can play good football on a good day. What he's really good at doing is when his sides are on their sort of B or C or even D game, they get points. Ronny Deila at Vålerenga, there's no way that side under Deila would have picked up any wins in those 3 games, in my opinion. They might not have got any points. And that's the difference that Fadugba does. But at the end of the day, sometimes these expected goals things do come back to bite you eventually, don't they? So watch out for them. They've been quite lucky in that sort of thing recently. So statistics will say that they can't keep it up, but he's getting the most out of that team in terms of points right now.
Yeah, it sounds like Mjøndalen had more swipes at them than a Tinder profile, as you mentioned there. But at Molde, of course, we've had their manager on the show, and Vålerenga, we've had their youth coach, Jack Brazil, on the show. So as always, subscribe to the Nordic Football Podcast, and you can dig into the archives. Bodø Glimt, we've had their sporting director. We've had quite a few guests, to be honest. So we've got a really nice back catalogue if you want to listen to some of the people involved at these clubs, to be fair. We're not going to preview the weekend's games in Norway just simply because this show is going to come out just before the games take place. But there is a massive game, Bodø Glimt against Molde, which is taking place on Sunday at 5 p.m. UK time. Not entirely sure if it will be on Eurosport, but if it is, it's definitely worth watching. And even if it's not, definitely worth watching the top two against each other. Do you have, just very quickly, in a sentence, Steve, do you have a prediction for that game?
Goals. Yeah, there'll be a lot of goals in it, I think. And I think Bodø Glimt probably will win that match. I think it kicks off 1 hour about... I think the Premier League final round kicks off at 4 o'clock, right? Am I right in saying that? So when the Premier League final matches are over, switch over to Molde against Bodø Glimt in the Eliteserien for the second half. It'll be well worth you watching. If it is on Eurosport, I'll have to check. But if not, try and catch a stream of it somewhere because it's going to be a really big game, and I think it'll be wildly entertaining. And I'm sure we'll discuss it in the next podcast. Maybe even do a tactical analysis of that game. Who knows?
Yeah, that is going to be a huge game. It's probably the game of the weekend, isn't it? I mean, in Norway. So keep an eye out for that one. We've got some big games in both leagues, to be fair. We've got a massive game in Sweden as well. We've got AIK against Djurgården. Two underachievers in fairness, but always a tasty affair, even with no fans. So that's a big Stockholm derby. Big games galore. There's matches all the time at the moment, but keep it locked on the Nordic Football Podcast. And thank you for joining us. Going to wrap it up, aren't we now, Steve? Have you got any big? Are you ready for your cricket match? You think you're back to hold out?
Yeah, I'm particularly confident, to be honest. I'm glad I'm not a bowler. Let's just say that. But there's one question that I do need to answer here. It was put in by Ted about Zinckernagel at Rosenborg. He says, is Christopher Zinckernagel the perfect Mike Jensen replacement? So I'm going to answer that question now. I would say yes, he is. He's what Zinckernagel has done is it's fresh blood for a start, and that's what Rosenborg kind of needed to a degree. They've needed this sort of injection of someone coming in who's got that sort of temperament and mentality, driven mentality, determined. And he's really come up good for them recently. He got a couple of goals against Sandefjord. He's a canny player. He can play literally anywhere in midfield he wants. Like you name a spot there, and he can fill it in. But especially good finding space and very intelligent. He's got a good finish on him if he needs be. I think I've talked in previous podcasts about how good he is in the air. In fact, I actually did a piece on him on the Y-Scout blog last year, actually. I can dig that out somewhere. But he's actually surprisingly good in the air as well. Just a great player at finding, great positional player, actually, Zinckernagel. And I think in terms of Mike Jensen was obviously a big driving force for Rosenborg. And I think Zinckernagel can go a long way towards filling it. I like his mentality. He's come in there, and there's a few Rosenborg players the last couple of years who've kind of been a bit sulky. It hasn't really worked out, but he's knuckled down. He's got his head down, and I think he's been their best player this season, really. I think few would argue against that. And he's the type of player recruited from within the Eliteserien, by the way. And that is, Rosenborg have had good success recruiting guys from within the league. Like Berger Melling is another good example of that. Jørmund Assen has done well at times, although kind of Horneland didn't really get the best out of him. But yeah, he looks good for Rosenborg. Quite impressed with him, and I certainly think Rosenborg will finish third this season from what I've seen recently. No matter what manager they bring in, I think it's beyond them to reach the top two, but they should get the bronze medal.
Yeah, and for those who aren't aware of him, Christopher Zinckernagel is a 26-year-old Norwegian player, plays in midfield, and he's averaging a goal every 203 minutes this season. So 4 goals from 9 games, maybe one for your fantasy team. And before we end the show, I'm happy that you're finally in the Allsvenskan fantasy league, Steve, because that was, a disgrace, if I'm honest, to not be in it. And I had a little look at your performance. You did quite well. So let's see if you can catch me by the end of the season. That would be some moment of shame for me.
But, the table in the Allsvenskan fantasy at the minute, and it's not looking that great for you. At least you're not bottom, are you?
Sadly, I won't rule out you catching me by the end of the season.
There are a couple below you, so it's an improvement on last season from you.
Yeah, I had a good week. I've had a good week actually, and I can't remember who off the top of my head who's top of the league, but
The All-Stars got 106 points this week in the Allsvenskan.
Yeah, he played his I think he played his defensive card, so he got double point.
His defence part of the bus thing, hasn't he?
Yeah.
Fair play, he's top. I think he did really well last year, I think, in this as well. OCD All-Stars. JS, if you're listening, well done. But he's top of that league. And then second, we've got Russell Cannon with Peach Melberg. But, yeah.
Jimmy Tristing, the Nordic Football Podcast champion, currently 5th. So, riding the coattails, he's hanging in there, 20 points behind. Not a bad start.
Tweet out the join code for this league, won't you?
Yeah, we'll tweet out the join code. If you haven't joined yet, then do so. It's a strong league at the moment. But Meet My Warriors and JF Football are lagging towards the bottom of the table, to be honest. Where the Kalmar and I think you're the Ostersons of the league, to be honest. You didn't even enter the you're being investigated by CAS for you didn't even enter the league, to be honest. So you didn't even get the license. I entered,
but I've had points deducted.
Yeah, exactly. You're the Wigan of the Svenskan Fantasy League. But we're going to leave it there. Follow us on Twitter at Nordic Footpod, and get us on patreon.com/Nordic Football Podcast if you want to buy us a beer. Mine's been a Hogarden tonight. Steve, I haven't seen you drinking anything, so good for you. But hope you've enjoyed the show as always. Do subscribe. Give us your love. Please share it if you do enjoy the show, because we survive just from people sort of sharing it and spreading the word, really. So hope you've enjoyed it. And anything else to say, Steve? Any plugs?
That will do, I think. But thanks very much for listening. Take care, everyone. Stay safe, and we'll catch you again next time. Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.